Can I welcome everyone to the 34th meeting in 2019 of the Delegated Powers and Law Reform Committee. And the first item of business is to propose that we take items 7 and 8 in private because these involve consideration of draft reports, and these will be published once they're agreed. It's also proposed to take item 9 in private to consider the evidence heard today and agree any further action. Do we agree to that? Thank you. So today we've got before us Graham Day, Minister for Parliamentary Business and Veterans, to give evidence relating to the work of the committee during the parliamentary year 2018 to 2019, and Mr Day has got a number of officials with him. I'll just go through them. We've got Gerald Byrne from the Constitution and UK Relations Division, Alison Cool of the Legal Directorate, Susan Herbert, Legislation Delivery Manager from the Parliament and Legislation Unit, and Brian Peddle, EU Exit Legislation Delivery Manager from the Parliament and Legislation Unit. Can I welcome you all with your various long titles to the meeting. And we'll go straight into questions. So, Minister, you've previously spoken to the committee about the reduction of domestic SSIs due to the impact of EU exit instruments. Has this delay caused any problems in implementing Scottish legislation? I
don't think it's caused any problems in implementing Scottish legislation. We've had to be very sensible and pragmatic in the approach we've taken. And I'll ask Stephen. Stephen's he's one of my officials. He's not sitting at the table.
Well, does he want to join you?
I think we're fine. I mean, we can get into some detail with you about the kind of nuts and bolts of this, but we just, as the Parliament's committees have, simply had to knuckle down and do the best job we could, given the pressures that we've been under. We have progressed the legislative programme quite substantially. Yes, we did delay 5 bills at one point and 38 SSIs. Yeah. But those bills are all back on track and have progressed as we would have looked for them to do. And we can get into detail, if you want, around the 38 SSIs and where we've got to with those.
Okay, well, where are we with those?
Okay, if you just bear with me a second. So the specific detail that I can give you is that of the 38 SSIs, most will be laid by the end of April next year. And into the specifics, 17 of those will have been laid by the end of 2019. 22 of those will have been laid by the end of April 2020. There's one of those that was originally on the list of 38. We've subsequently come to the conclusion it's no longer considered. A deferral was actually styled and laid earlier than expected. And there have been 5 that we have abandoned on the grounds we don't believe them to be necessary now. So the overwhelming majority will be done by April 2020. We're not going to, as you know, we liaise closely with the committee, so we also look at committee workload in terms of timings of introduction of anything. So I'm content that we are progressing those as we require to do without suddenly presenting a burden to committees.
Okay. Is there any further prioritisation expected?
Okay. I'll ask Susan to come in on that.
Fine. No, not at the moment. We are managing the volumes proactively across the whole legislative programme, and specifically for SSIs. We have no plans at the moment to do any reprioritisation, but obviously if it came to pass that we needed to do so, we would, in consultation with portfolio ministers across the Scottish Government.
Okay. I guess the two unknowns here, convener, well, the one obvious known is the implications of Brexit still moving forward, and the other one is the impact of the budget situation and how committees will feel their workload is impacted by that and reprioritisation that they may wish to do. And as usual, we always try and engage with the committees as best we can to manage that.
I guess we might get some clarity on that this week.
Indeed, but and that there will then be an ongoing dialogue to clarify that. And as usual, I'm happy to write to yourself and the committee to keep you updated on any of the matters that we discuss.
Okay, lovely. So committee members have some questions as well. Stuart?
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, Minister and your team, and excuse the croaky throat. One of the things that the committee has appreciated and welcome is the improvement in the quality of secondary legislation, particularly the decrease of the SSIs reported under the 3 most significant reporting grounds. Can you tell the committee minister what actions that the government have undertaken to deliver this, but also how you plan to ensure that this high standard is continued going forward? And before you do answer that, just to make you aware that over the last couple of weeks there has been a slight increase in the numbers of instruments that actually have been reported under the 3 most significant grounds.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. We'll look into that because we never want to see a sort of stepping back from the improvement that had been made. As you know, there's been a considerable effort made in the face of a very intense workload that government officials have faced as a consequence of Brexit. And I think it's quite an achievement that the number of instruments reported remains at 11.5% this year. I still think that's too high, but I think in the face of the workload and the other pressures that people have faced, I think it's quite an achievement. We have a number of measures in place to try and check and ensure that the instruments that come forward are in the right space. Clearly, there have been a number of affirmative instruments that have been withdrawn for a variety of reasons. That's been noted in the committee's report. There can be a variety of reasons for that. In one case, it was simply a misspelling, if I remember rightly. In another case, there was some stakeholder concern, and the beauty of an affirmative instrument is you can withdraw it and then bring it back, and we took that on board. So I think there's an element there of being as responsive as we can be at that time, rather than, as sometimes the case with negative instruments, we'll get around to dealing with a very minor concern sometime in the future. We're absolutely not complacent. The officials will tell you that. I'm forever asking, why has that happened? Was there not a way of avoiding that? So, as I say, despite the additional pressures we're facing, there is a real drive to get this right as best we can. But I'd be happy to hear from the committee directly about any upsurge recently, and we'll have a look at that.
Okay, no, that'd be helpful, thank you. Certainly there's been a couple of the parliamentary committees who have seen an increase in SSIs to them, and one of which is the Social Security Committee. That saw a rise from 6 SSIs to 29. Obviously, as this considers the impact of the Social Security Scotland Act 2018. Now, given the significant delegated powers in the Act, what is the Scottish Government doing to ensure that the Social Security Committee actually has all the information it needs when it's scrutinising these SSIs?
Do you have examples of where they haven't felt they have had all the necessary information?
Well, I don't have any particular example in front of me at the moment, but certainly one of the things that's came up when we've been looking at the work has just been that sheer increase in the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Balfour's indicating it might.
I sit on the Social Security Committee, and I suppose one of the concerns I've raised is that and maybe this is more to do with the timing of things, but for example, on this coming Thursday, the Minister's coming to give evidence on 2 statutory instruments, and then we've been asked to vote on them on the same day. Now, I think these are fairly uncontroversial, but I suppose the question would be around that is, if, say, the committee wanted to take more evidence, do more work, there's no time lag for that. And I suppose one of the things I would be keen to see is the Cabinet Secretary coming to give evidence 1 week and at least a week's delay before the committee's asked to approve them. Or it just seems to me that how can you have, if anything came up under scrutiny, how would you then take that one forward?
I find that a difficult question to answer because it's not something that's been brought to me before. And as I said earlier, all of our Cabinet Secretaries make a concerted effort to be as helpful to committees as possible. I guess that's also a matter for committee management internally to decide when they're going to vote on evidence taken. I'm happy to take that away and give it some further consideration and talk to the Social Security Cabinet Secretary and come back to you on that. But it's not something that had been raised with me before as being an issue. So if you're content, convener, can I take that away, look into it and come back to you?
Yes, absolutely. And what we could do as well is perhaps reach out to the Social Security Committee and find out if they've got any specific concerns.
Yeah, as I say, it's certainly not something that's been brought to me at all, and conveners are usually quite quick to raise any issues they have.
That's true. Okay. Stuart, are you okay with that?
I'm fine, thanks.
Right. We're not exactly fine, but okay. Right. Mary.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning. I wanted to start by asking you about historical commitments, because you'll know that it's something that this committee has pursued, and the previous committee in the previous session has also pursued outstanding historical commitments. And at the start of this reporting year, there were 12 outstanding commitments. There are now 7. I wonder if you could update us on what plans you have to meet those commitments and when those commitments are liable to be met.
Okay, so this was something we discussed the last time I was in front of the committee, and I gave an update. So in terms of the historic commitments, there were 16 historic commitments outstanding on the 11th of December last year. We've made good progress with 10 of those. They've already been met. There are another 6 which will be met by March 2021, which is the deadline. The majority of those will be met before then, so they'll be dealt with. There are, of course, some new outstanding commitments, 10 in total, as we understand it, and we would expect 7 of those to be met by the spring of this coming year, and I can provide details of which 7 those are. So we're very much alive to the need to, as the committee has asked us to do, to address these, and I'm happy to continue to write to the committee and update them as we make progress on those.
Yeah, that would be helpful if you could give us a bit more detail about the commitments.
Do you want the detail on the 7 out of the 10 new ones?
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
So what we anticipate is that by the spring of 2020 we will have addressed the commitments around the Felling Scotland regulations, Forestry and Land Management Scotland Act 2018, education fees and student support, proposed draft regulations and deposit return scheme, fishing boat designation, Planning Scotland Act commencement provisions, and the Environment EU Scotland Amendment number 2 regulations. So those 7 we expect to be dealt with by the spring of the coming year, and that leaves 3 which we're working through, and I'm happy to write to the committee and advise.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I mean, given the number of SSIs that are going to come as we progress through through Brexit in the coming year, do those SSIs have any knock-on impact in government dealing with the historic commitments?
You mean in terms of workload?
Yeah.
Yes and no. I mean, any additional workload obviously creates difficulty, but as the committees have risen to the challenge, so have our officials, and we're not anticipating not fulfilling those commitments because of what's coming down the track. But I caveat everything by saying, you know, Brexit, however that works out, can have an impact. So does the budget situation as well. So the position today is no, we fully anticipate being able to do this, but it could change.
And does and I use the word delay with a bit of caution, because you've explained the deadline for meeting these commitments, but does the length of time it takes to meet those commitments have any further detrimental impact on the legislation that needs to be passed or changes that need to be made in order to meet them?
No. We don't see it that way at all, no.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
So can I just take a step back? I mean, you said there was 11. Sorry, you said there were 10 new commitments.
10 new commitments, so we read it.
We think there might be 11, but I'm not saying we're right, but I just.
Okay, well let's compare notes.
Yeah.
Let's correspond with the committee and pin those down. Our understanding is 10, but happy to be corrected in that and come back to you.
Yeah, fine. Okay, thanks, Mary. Tom?
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, Minister. I have two questions. The first concerns the documentation that is published along with SSIs that provides background and explanatory information. The committee has been very happy with the quality of that documentation to assist and aid readers in understanding the purpose and intent of the SSI. Can the Minister give the committee some idea of what work's been undertaken to ensure that this standard and quality is maintained going forward?
Essentially, in the first instance, listening to the concerns that were expressed by committees. I think probably legitimate concerns have, and I say that as a former committee convener. My predecessor, Joe Fitzpatrick, began that process and it's continued under myself, and we have got to the point where there is that an explanatory paragraph, couple of paragraphs to outline at the outset in simple terms you know, what the instrument sets out to do. I'm heartened that I've not heard any further concern from committee conveners. The conveners group may have a different view, and it's just not reached me, but like in general terms, it seems to me like we've got into a good space on that, and we'll continue to do that. But as ever, if this committee or others notes anything or feels that there's something else we could do differently, I'm more than happy to hear that and take that on board.
Thank you. My second question concerns affirmative instruments that are withdrawn. Now, in your previous answer, you made reference to the importance of dialogue and listening, and clearly it's welcome where defects are spotted in an affirmative instrument the government seeks to withdraw and reintroduce. But I think there's a concern that the committee would have is that we would want to be in a position where instruments would not have to be withdrawn because they would be of the required quality when introduced. What work has been undertaken to reduce the number of instruments that need to be withdrawn?
Well, clearly, I would prefer that that was the situation as well. But in defence of our officials, you know, we're dealing with human beings. Human error can occur, especially when there's a very intense workload. The honest answer to your question is that that's a bit of a work in progress, because I've obviously asked some questions about some of the numbers there around affirmative instruments, and I'm drilling down into that. I've given a couple of examples of the circumstances there where affirmative instruments were withdrawn. One was an error, a very simple error. The other one was taking account of stakeholder concerns, and sometimes you won't be aware of those until you get into the instrument. But we are currently looking at that situation because there has been a slight increase. We don't want to see that, and we'll continue with that work to try and get that as right as we can do. But I do stress, and I hope I'm not being defensive in saying this, I think it's remarkable that we have driven down the number of concerns that are raised about instruments in the light of the workload that's being carried by the government.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Okay. I've just got a question. You'll be aware that the committee and the government has been in dialogue for, well, seems like years over the council tax reduction regulations. We've been calling for a consolidation of that. Is there any update on that?
I think that remains one where we're going to have to agree to disagree, convener, with respect. We can agree on many things. There has been some work done on that. I just want to get the detail of it. Yeah, thank you. We've published online versions of the regulations showing the effect of the amending regulations, and we believe that that provides the clarity needed. None of the key stakeholders have suggested that the regulations need formal consolidation, although I know that the committee holds to that view. And I understand that at least one local authority has welcomed the Keeling version that we've published. Right. So we think we've come some of the way to addressing the concerns, but we don't have plans to satisfy the committee's ask, I'm afraid, at this stage.
Okay. I think I'd heard a rumour that there might have been some movement on that. But...
Well, if you've heard a rumour, it's not one I'm aware of at this moment, convener.
Right. Which council was it?
We don't know is the answer.
Can you let us know?
Yes, we will.
Right. Thank you. Jeremy?
I hope you're not going to take them to task.
No. might write to them and see what their views are. Jeremy.
Thank you, and good morning again, Minister. Just picking up again, just on some of the questions by my colleague Mary Fee. Obviously, in the result of last week's election, we are looking like we're going to withdraw from the EU at the end of next month. I'm just wondering, are you satisfied that the Scottish Statute Book is adequately updated to take into account the UK leaving the EU, and if not, what work needs to be done over the next 6 to 7 weeks?
Okay, so as you know, we've done a considerable amount of work, and by we I mean the Parliament as well as the Government, to get the statute book as in good shape as we possibly can. There, as things stand, there remain a number of pieces of work we would still have to do. I'm just trying to get the numbers, the specific numbers.
Yes, so, I mean, first of all, it's probably important to say that a number of the fixes have been identified as needing to be done by exit day, and others that could be done in longer time after exit day. Of course, there were previous exercises for previous exit days, most recently for the 31st of October, and I think we were satisfied that all the fixes that needed to be done for 31st October were done. There has since been some further fixes working towards the subsequent exit day of 31st January, and that work is continuing. It may now be less likely that the UK would leave without a deal on the 31st of January, but we've yet to see the withdrawal agreement bill. We don't yet have a guarantee that that won't happen, and these fixes would still need to be made in any case. So we have, in terms of the number of instruments that we expect still to make, at the moment we are expecting to notify another 10 UK SIs before the 31st of January and 12 after the 31st of January. And in terms of SSIs, expecting to have 9 by the 31st of January and 20 afterwards. As ever, these numbers are subject to change, but that is our current estimate and the current programme.
Well, what may happen is, depending on the events of the next few weeks, it may be that we will lay some of these instruments, but it will be possible to give Parliament more time, depending on how things turn out, because we're conscious of the desire of Parliament to have as much time as possible to scrutinise. This is a bit up in the air at the moment.
So if and I appreciate it's a bit speculative, but let's presume the withdrawal bill is passed at Westminster over the next few weeks once Parliament returns after Christmas recess. How much work does this Parliament have to do in that 3 to 4 week period?
Alison.
Be worth saying that if the withdrawal agreement bill is going through, then we're in a sort of new scenario, if you like. So we've been very focused on the no deal planning and the instruments that are required for that, and Brian's outlined what we would need to do. Now, we may get to a point where we can move towards the new scenario, but at the moment I think we're not at that point, so we're working on both scenarios. But if the withdrawal agreement bill, and it's clear that it's going through, and I don't think we're quite at that point yet, then, as Brian says, some of the deficiency instruments that we would have been bringing forward, the Parliament will not need to consider those in time for 31st January, because exit day is effectively shifted until the end of December 2020. And we still have a sort of rump of instruments that we were planning to do for the end of 2020, which weren't critical for exit day. And there may also be other instruments that have to be brought forward to take account of changes to EU law during the implementation period. So that's been a continual moving target that we've been working with.
Okay. And in regard to, are you expected any more consent notifications in January from Westminster?
At the moment, on our current plans, we would be expecting 10. If we have sufficient certainty, or probably more accurately, the UK government has sufficient certainty and then communicates that to us in terms of their intentions, that we don't need to notify some or all of those by the 31st of January because we don't now expect to leave on the 31st of January, then those notifications might take place in longer time. We are having a discussion with UK government officials tomorrow, at which I hope we will learn more about their plans.
Okay, thank you.
Again, it's a situation that's a bit fluid, and happy to keep the committee updated as we become clearer on what's happening.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Tom?
Yeah, just a supplementary to Mr Balfour's questioning. I appreciate officials aren't in a position to offer a political interpretation, but it seems fairly likely that the withdrawal bill will now go through, given the political arithmetic at Westminster by the end of January. Reports today suggest that the UK government will seek to legislate to prevent a the transition period being extended beyond the end of December. Now, of course, that is subject to parliamentary sovereignty and could be amended, but that's the clear policy intent of the UK government, that there will be no transition period beyond the end of December next year, which means that a future relationship has to be agreed and signed off by the end of June. And I think by common consent that is an incredibly demanding timetable. In the event that no future relationship is agreed by the end of June, then we are effectively heading for a no-deal cliff edge at the end of next year. If that were to be the case, what implications would that have for Parliament returning after summer recess in September with regards to its work programme? Would there be a significant number of instruments or legislation required to address this new no-deal scenario at the end of December 2020? I'm conscious, given that there will be legislative pressures as we approach the dissolution of Parliament as well. So I just want to have an understanding that, should we be facing that new no-deal scenario at the end of December, what planning is going into that possible set of scenarios and what implications does it have?
I suppose, can I just say, without commenting on the political aspect of that, just in terms of the withdrawal agreement, to clarify, what needs to happen at the end of June is a decision on whether or not to have an extension, but the free trade agreement doesn't have to be in place until the end of December. So it would be at that point that it would be clear whether or not we're effectively in a sort of no-deal scenario. I mean, I think the sort of broad answer to that is all of the deficiency work that we have done to date then kicks in and is relevant, subject to any changes we've had to make over this year to take account of changes to EU law over 2020.
I suppose my question is, I appreciate that there will be up until the end of December next year, but if we were to reach a scenario where we come back in September, an extension has not been requested by the UK government, and it is seeming, and I appreciate this would be a political interpretation, that insufficient progress has been made, raising the stakes, would that have an impact on Parliament's workload, the workload of this and other committees, in addressing any deficiencies when we return after summer recess in September? Or is it the case that most of that work has already been done in anticipation of a 31st of October or 31st of January?
The overwhelming majority of the work has been done to get us into that position if it was necessary. There's a lot of speculation at the moment,
of course,
as to what will be. I mean, I read speculation about issues around workers' rights today. It is media speculation. Until we see the WAB, it's difficult to know exactly what we're facing. Once we see that, then there's a number of questions may arise, and we'll have to reflect on those.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions from members? No. Okay. Well, if I can thank you for your time, Minister, and your officials, and that exhausts the session.
Okay. And thank you, the committee, for all their efforts over the past year.
Okay. And thanks for working with us, and we'll look forward to hearing you on an ongoing basis. We'll just suspend to let the Minister leave. Right, agenda item 3 is to consider SSIs laid under the European Union Withdrawal Act 2018. We're considering the scrutiny procedure under which it's been laid and the categorisation applied by the Scottish Government. So the Public Procurement, etc. Scotland Amendment, EU Exit Amendment, number 2 Regulations 2019 SSI 2019-414 has been laid under the negative procedure and it's been categorised as of low significance. The instrument makes minor and technical amendments to the Public Procurement, etc. Scotland Amendment EU Exit Regulations 2019, which do not amount to a policy change. Our advisers indicate the scrutiny procedure and categorisation could be appropriate. So are we content with that? Okay. Then we've got the Environmental Impact Assessment Transport EU Exit Scotland Amendment Regulations 2019 SSI 2019-415. That's been laid under the negative procedure and it's been categorised as of low significance. The instrument makes minor and technical amendments to provisions that on exit day will become retained EU law on environmental impact assessments. And again, our advisers indicate the scrutiny procedure and categorisation could be appropriate. So once again, are we content with that? Okay, good. Agenda item 4, we're considering instruments subject to affirmative procedure. No points have been raised on the draft relevant adjustments to Common Parts Disabled Persons Scotland Regulations 2020. So is the committee content with this instrument? Okay. And agenda item 5 is to consider instruments subject to the negative procedure. No points have been raised on SSI 2019-414. So is the committee content with this? Okay. And agenda item 6, we're considering instruments that are not subject to any parliamentary procedure. No points have been raised on SSIs 2019-406, 413 and 417. So is the committee content with these instruments? Okay, and I'll move the meeting into private.